Welcome to Jude, the podcast. I am David Jude, and I am your host for this show. And boy, do we have a topic for you. The topic this week is death. Yes, death. How does that make you feel? What do you think about death? What do you think about the planning for your death? Have you given much thought to that? I hadn't. I really hadn't. I do have a predetermined vision, I think, of what this process needs to look like, because I didn't know something else existed. Well, enter this week's guest, and you're going to love her. It's Lauren Hunter Smith. Lauren is the Bluegrass Death Doula. Her services are amazing. Again, I'd never heard of these type of services, but as you listen to her show, this process doesn't have to be scary. As she says, it's how to give your family a way to honor you. And that planning can actually start now. It's a fascinating stuff. I learned a whole lot from Lauren. I think you will too. Listen into what she has to say. We'll have links to all of her pages in our show notes. Also, check out our sponsors, please. We'll have links there in our show notes there for them too. I hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll catch you on the next one. Off we go. And good to see you. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You've been busy?
Yeah.
You have been busy.
Spooky season. It's always busy.
I kind of thought that maybe your busy time of year, but then again, you're never really sure in your line of work what you're doing, but
right. If pumpkins make you feel better talking about death, let's get some pumpkins.
We could have had some pumpkins here tonight. I don't know where we'd got them.
A comfort pumpkin.
Or comfort turkey legs.
Whatever you need.
Whatever you need.
We'll get
That's
that.
Exactly right. I'm pretty excited that you're here. This is going to be a good time.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, glad you made it. Glad you're here, and we'll have a good time with this. So let's just start with, let's just jump into it. Okay. I think there's a lot to talk about. I think we're going to have a big conversation here. So when our friend told us, made a referral for you to come, right? I had never heard of what a doula, and I don't even know if I'm saying that right. So let's just start from the beginning. Am I even saying that right?
You are. It's an ancient Greek word, and it just means a woman who provides services. So it's not tied to any one industry. Of course, now primarily you'll see birth doulas. Yeah. There are also spectrum doulas who kind of cover everything in between life and death, and then death doulas. Traditionally speaking, once you sort of aged out of being a birth doula, you transitioned into a death doula.
So does doula just go with the cycle of life?
I mean, where we see it, yes. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Like you could be a beer doula if you wanted to, an aquarium doula, whatever you want.
Yeah, so there we go. Employed to provide guidance and support. Yeah, and of course it mentions it goes to talking about the birth doula. Yeah. So interesting. My wife's a nurse, and so she had heard of it. Amanda had heard of it. So I just associate it with motherhood and those type of things. I had never understood or heard of that word. And so when I went home, it's like, oh my gosh, we got the Bluegrass Death Doula coming on the show. This is going to be awesome.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. And she's kind of looking at me like, what? And I'm like, oh, I don't even know what, I have no idea what they've been talking about.
It could have been anything.
It could have been anything, but anything with Bluegrass Death Doula in a title, it's that makes your ears perk up. So she was like, well, I've heard of a birth doula before, but I've never heard of a death doula. And I'm like, well, I've never heard of either. So what is it? And it's like, well, it's a planning thing, but you need to answer that.
Yeah. Well, and I have a young son, so I'm really grateful that I've had that opportunity somewhat recently, because there is a lot of crossover. There's a lot that goes back and forth, swaddle to shroud, that whole thing.
That's got to be on your website somewhere.
She's getting a makeover. Maybe I'll put it in there. But, a death doula is a person who helps people and their families plan and prepare for end of life. So my goal is to make you and your family feel comfortable proceeding with your end of life plans.
Yeah. How did you run into this?
It's not one good, straightforward answer. I really didn't want to continue working for other people the rest of my life. So I was looking for something to do. And I was realizing, working for nonprofits, that I was doing a lot of stuff for other people that I wanted to do for myself. So I started looking for opportunities.
Meaning like running a business or?
Yeah, I just didn't want to work for other people.
Yeah.
Which I know is like a narrow spectrum. I was like, I can't do it anymore.
Other people get pretty crappy sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and then, I was writing grants and doing all those type of things. I was like, man, I could be doing this for me. I'm tired of doing it for other people. But I've always kind of been a little bit of a ghoul. I was kind of an odd, death-obsessed kid. Lightning bug funerals, that kind of thing. But when the pandemic came, I was laid off, and then I was laid off again. And I was following another death doula. She posted an opportunity for a scholarship for people who had been laid off during the pandemic. I got that scholarship.
Like a training type of opportunity?
Mm-hmm. It was, it's supposed to be a 6-week program. I did it in 2 weeks just because I loved it and couldn't stop consuming it. And from there, I just kind of tried to do supplemental type things.
Yeah.
Like I went to all the funeral homes in town and got their general price list, introduced myself. I talked to a lot of different religious officiants. I went to all the cemeteries, just, lots of different things like that kind of beefed up my resume.
Were they receptive to that? I mean,
not for the most part, no. But the ones who were receptive were just absolutely incredible. So I got to do a lot of really cool things just because, basically because I was like, can I do that? They'd be like, yeah, come on.
So you would end up at a funeral home and introduce yourself. This is who I am and the services I'm providing. And I'm surprised they gave you a price list.
They have to. That is legally required. You can walk into any funeral home and say, I want your general price list. If they don't give it to you, congratulations, you're a very rich person.
So anybody, not just like I guess everybody's a potential client, right?
You can go in there anytime, pick it up. And there's actually legislation going through right now to make them post on their website what their price list is.
Well, that'll be interesting, won't it?
Yeah, I'm sure they don't want to do that.
I'm quite certain they don't want to. So is the funeral home business then, is it that tightly regulated? Is it tightly controlled by the government?
I wouldn't say it's tightly controlled by the government. Kind of almost the opposite. I think a lot of just people in general don't want to deal with death. They don't want to deal with what they're doing. And so they maybe even get away with a little bit more than you would otherwise.
But so then why would someone mandate them to put their price list?
Oh, it was a public demand. It has risen up from, specifically Caitlin Daughtry. But
who's that?
She wrote, Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? From Here to Eternity. Yeah. And I mean, that book's just basic questions about death. It's a great read. She's made all of her books free through the library, like the Libby app, so you can get them anywhere. She's sort of like the modern death wave queen.
That's awesome. Okay. So she's put then some type of public pressure out and about into the world, and the world is saying,
yeah, you should know that price list before you go in there while you're grieving, and you need to know your budget and what you're able to do. Yeah.
So, I don't have funeral home experience by no stretch, and we can get into some of that here in a minute, but so I'm not pointing or poking at anyone, but it just seems that industry is so ripe with opportunity to take advantage of people. I don't know if they do, if they don't, but
I mean, there are really great funeral directors, and some of them aren't. Sure. Just like any industry. It's an industry. It's there to make money. I don't blame them for that, but we certainly could go about it in a more educated and gentle way.
Yes, staying on the funeral home industry part of it. I mean, do the services differ from home to home? And to me, and where I'm at with it, it's a pretty standardized service, right? You get a dead body and you process it and put it in the expensive casket and your service and go on.
It really depends on who your funeral director is and what kind of guidance and how much time they're willing to spend with the family and how many of them there are. You might be in a funeral home that has 2 funeral directors. You might be with a home that has 30, and that person can spend more time with the family. Most of the time it's package driven. It's something, I was in the Peace Corps in West Africa, and something I learned: when you barter, you put a lot of stuff together because it's harder to track. So right. I feel like that's part of the deal. You make these packages, and then people aren't necessarily taking into account everything they're paying for.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine or to visualize a profit margin with a package.
Right. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can always customize it. And there is pressure, like, oh, your mom would have really wanted it this way, or your mom would have, like they do have a bit of manipulation in that way. But that's, another interesting thing. You are legally protected in buying your own casket. You can do that at any funeral home you want. So, yeah. But you have to know that. And I think there's so many things like that people just don't realize they can even do.
And we'll get to all that. I mean, because there's a lot to unpack with that. Yeah. And so I think it seems to me that, death is one of those things super highly emotionally charged, obviously, and a very compassionate time. And again, I'm not pointing at anybody, but that's what it seems like to me, that the funeral home directors are ripe for playing upon that passion or compassion or human emotion.
Right. And it's like anywhere, hospice is the same way. You might have the best hospice nurse in the world and you might not. And it's literally who picks up that assignment. It's the same kind of deal. There is always a dice roll in there. Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
Which is what makes this so interesting to talk about, because there's other solutions and alternatives out there. And
absolutely.
Interesting stuff. My only real experience with a funeral home that I know of, going to funerals, of course, but getting into the behind the scenes was my previous work in law enforcement.
Oh, okay.
And then I did a lot of crime scene stuff and collision stuff. And so you deal with fatalities and dead bodies.
Seen some things.
You see some things. That's exactly right. And so I met a guy, still friends today, that, what would you call him?
Funeral director?
Well, I don't know what
embalmer?
He was. Let's go with embalmer, but he did some of the reconstruction, I guess, on the.
Okay, that's an embalmer.
Okay. Where they would fix the bodies up before they put them into the casket. And so with our work, you see some pretty gruesome things back in the day. And sometimes you just need to go and you need to see the body, you need to see things and those type of things. So that was my first behind the scenes part of being in a funeral home, was watching him basically.
Doing reconstructive service.
Yeah. Reconstructing and not just the autopsy part, but facial stuff, head injuries and those things to prepare the body. And
some of those people are unbelievably talented. Like they can do incredible things.
I mean, they're artists in their own way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now I've met a couple others along the way, but I've never, had the opportunity to be in the home with them or in their shop with them. But that always sat with me, like, wow, I never thought about who has to do that.
Right.
But sure enough, you meet those people and you're like, that's some pretty freaking talented work to try to make.
Well, and there's all sorts of crazy little tricks. Like it's not a kit you go buy, there's all fishing line and cans and tape and all sorts of things going on.
Yeah. And that's what he was explaining. Sometimes you have to sew these things shut or sew these things open or, not to mention the makeup and.
Grandma's in a padded bra every time.
Those puppies got to stick up somehow.
Yeah, don't they? Yeah. Embalming fluid doesn't do great things to fatty tissue.
I'd never thought about that, but I'll never forget that now.
You won't. You'll go in, you'll be like, oh, yeah, that
a padded bra.
That looks different.
Granny, what did you do before you died?
Good for you, girl.
Yeah, go, girl. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, reconstructive services can be really, really important, especially when people lose someone suddenly, which, the type of work you're talking about, that's a sudden loss.
Right.
I generally am not a huge embalming fan, but if I did lose my child suddenly, I would probably want to see them again, and I can understand why people would seek out those services.
Which is a good point, right? And I don't so much want to put you on the spot with that, but let's talk a little bit about why someone would or would not choose an embalming service.
Sure. So embalming, you don't have to do it. Let's just start there. It's a choice you make. It's not something you're required to do. If you're going to lay out and people are going to view you over a large span of time, you need to be embalmed. That being said, other countries use refrigeration fairly successfully. Embalming is kind of uniquely American in that. Embalming fluid is a disinfectant and a preservative, so you're doing both those things at the same time. The procedure itself can be really invasive. It's not a delicate thing. So I understand why people don't necessarily want to undergo it. The chemicals used are not great for the environment, so that's another reason you might not want to do it. In terms of American funeral homes, if you choose not to, you can still have a service. They'll just keep the coffin closed. You're refrigerated, and you're just kind of on a different timeline. You know, if you're doing things naturally, which, you know, that's something I kind of have an expertise in, then we're on a timeline. We've got to move things a little bit more quickly than we would if the body were embalmed or cremated or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Is it a religious, not with you specifically, but is it embalming a religious endeavor, or is it just a typical custom that we don't know the difference of?
It's a fun history. So in terms of religion, Jewish people and Muslim people, they don't embalm. You don't violate a body like that. That's absolutely religious for them. I've never found a text that says this, but just the way we do death, where we're going to embalm the body and preserve it, and then we're going to put it underground, and we're going to seal it 3 times. In my mind, that is sort of a rapture, like I want my body preserved and kept in good shape kind of thing. But I've never seen a text connect those 2 things.
Yeah.
It just makes sense to me. And certainly in terms of like what a Christian funeral looks like, you would be embalmed in order to be able to do that. But in terms of why we choose embalming, it goes back to World War II. Almost all of our American death practices are based in war. And there's this man named Hubert Eden, and he owned Forest Lawn Cemetery. And it was the famous cemetery. Like if you were a famous person, that's where you went.
Is that the one in L.A.?
Mm-hmm. It's in L.A. Graves are marked like very minimally. It's private. You have to have permission to be in there. But he became famous for doing these just really unbelievable reconstructions with people. And he's really the one who, like, before you went to the movies, you would see a reel of a celebrity who had been, you know, embalmed and done the cosmetology with Hubert Eden. And it was like what you watched ahead of time, because it was so incredible that, you know, here's this person who's passed, but they look absolutely alive. And that's sort of where that trend starts.
So embalming, you're saying embalming started somewhere around the World War II era?
And with that, that's when we really start saying we're going to spend money, and that's how we're going to show our reverence for someone. It's also the point where we're starting to take bodies out of the home. Rather than doing our funerals at home, a funeral director is going to come do it. And it's all right in that same like display of wealth that occurs there. You know, when you have a house, 2 kids, 2 cars, that kind of thing. Right. And you have a proper funeral at a funeral home. It's in that same line of things.
So, I mean, so they really turned it into a service industry, for a lack of a better description for it.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't really see embalmers until the Civil War here, at least. Well, and that's not entirely true. You know, like we have ancient Egypt and those type of things. But in the way we know it, they come during the Civil War. And embalmers would set up tents outside battlefields. And you as a soldier could go and prepay for them to embalm you and ship you home. And they would just travel with the battles. And that's where this industry started. Wow, that's amazing. I've never heard of that. And I'm not a huge history person, you know. I mean, I appreciate it, of course, but I never really cared enough to study it deeply. But what an interesting fact. I've never seen that before. So you had packs of embalmers that would travel the fighting units around. Yeah. That's how they did it. They just kind of followed the battlefields around, and you could prepay or get your money back. Well, and that's also like this idea that you have to be embalmed. That comes from that same era. The train system's coming up. And the train system wants to be luxury liners. They do not want to ship bodies. But at the same time, a war is occurring and people are shipping bodies. And I've read accounts where initially you could smell the train coming in, and then you just smelled it all the time because there were just so many bodies. So it's the train system who says, we're not shipping anything until you embalm it. But what's really interesting is at that time, that didn't mean anything. Like they might put you in a barrel of vinegar. They might put you in a barrel of whiskey. They might stuff you with sawdust. It doesn't mean anyone's saying. So you're thinking about hiring a private investigator, huh? Think knowledge, experience, and trust. Think DPJ Consulting. Listen, we're the folks you want on your team. Whether it's a criminal matter, corporate, or an administrative issue, or maybe something more personal, you need to make the right choice for you. Our house of expertise at DPJ Consulting can help you with investigations, and that can mean a whole lot of different things.
pre-employment background checks, personal VIP security, and so much more. Check us out at dpjconsulting.com. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, or give us a call at 855-TEAM-DPJ. That's 855-TEAM-DPJ. Give us a call. It costs nothing to talk. It costs you everything if we don't. Well, that was my next question. Then who learned to do that, to ship what embalming meant?
I'm not sure where the actual shift to like, this is the fluid we're going to use, this is how we're going to regulate it. I don't know exactly where that happens, but
wow,
I'd say further back than.
Do you think our grieving process, or this funeral process? Yeah, look at there. Yeah, there they are.
That's the photo you always see.
Yeah. Huh. And I guess I've seen, like every movie or documentary portrays, an infirmary or something of that matter, but it always seems like the story cuts off before you get into the how to move a dead body from the tent to wherever the dead body goes from. And I've never really thought about, in our local cemetery, there's deaths from that time, the Civil War in that cemetery. And I never really considered, I just, maybe as ignorant as this sounds, just thought maybe they died locally.
And some of them probably did.
Probably did.
It's probably a
because we're in that area.
Smash. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Some things happened.
Do you think our death rituals, we talked a little bit about Christian funerals and those type of things, but do you think, have we morphed into this system based on capitalism or based on this service industry? Or do you think it goes back from what we've been taught through film? Like, we're seeing pictures and you talk roughly about going all the way back into ancient days, mummification and this presentation to the afterlife. Or how have we morphed into this idea of I've got to be triple casket thingy? And
right. Well, and I think a lot of the time for American people, just the idea that you're going to feel bad is something that we're adverse to. Like, we're automatically not going to deal with that. And when someone has died, you feel bad. Yeah. And the important part in that is that's fine. Like, you're supposed to feel bad. You're supposed to feel sad. There, of course, is a limit to that. But I think culturally, we just don't really have a lot of death rituals. We've really gotten away from that. And that's something I hear from people a lot too, is that they didn't get what they needed from their loved one's funeral because it's a canned service. It's a service. You go in and you pay somebody and they deal with it. And then nothing personal has happened. If you're not willing to contribute the eulogy, no one said anything personal. It's very unlikely that your funeral director knew whoever is passed.
Right.
And it just really can turn into almost a traumatic experience for people. So yeah, I think we could do a whole lot better. And I think a lot of that is just personalizing what we experience at the end of life, not just as a dying person, but in grief after that.
Yeah. I've always, I'm afraid to think too much about my own death and how to do it. I've always told my wife, just throw a party, And I've also said, I don't give a shit what you do with my body, right? I'm dead and gone.
Put me in the trash.
Throw me outside if you want, or, set me up with like Manny back here, or, put me out in the front yard if you want.
That happens.
We always talked about donating her body, and she had some pose she wanted to be in, and she, Rigger could sit in, and she's flipping off the world and grabbing her whatever.
Very nice. Yeah. Make a statement.
Yeah, so some med student somewhere had unwrapped that and like, oh my God. Yeah. But I guess it leads to, planning and thinking about those things. And one of the things that I enjoyed from New Orleans, they have a different system where they kind of just party and march down the street singing songs and things like that. I thought that was pretty interesting. So they have a different way. Of course, they bury above ground.
Correct.
Is there a difference between that process?
You do have to be embalmed if you're going into a mausoleum. I don't know if you've ever been in a cemetery when they're pulling those bodies out. Those mausoleums in New Orleans, they typically host up to an entire family. So it'll be several bodies. And they just kind of open your mausoleum, scoop out what's there, put it in a bag, and shove the next one in.
Wow. Put the bag back in?
Yeah. I was actually there as a child, but they were pulling out a grave, and a neck bone had a blue polyester tie, like where it hadn't decomposed. So that's something that's kind of burned into my memory.
Yeah, but I would think that's pretty cool. I would find some interest in that.
Definitely a lesson in decomposition and plastic.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. That's what I would find interesting, right? Because you already have us, as if that experience is not enough to like, I'm going to watch you clean out a mausoleum grave. And then you pull out a neck bone with a tie on it. To me, I would find that fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be asking 1,000 questions about that, even though it's obvious that the tie is not going to.
Well, and they didn't care. Like, I just remember there was a worker there doing it. And he was like, hey, you want to see? We're like, okay.
Well, yeah, I want to see.
You offering. All right.
Yeah, I want to see that. For work way back in the day, I had the opportunity to travel to Mexico for about 3.5 weeks and live down there for a little bit. And as part of that trip, we went to the different surrounding cities that basically represent the population, the Mexican population that we see here, for tobacco and horses and things like that. So super educational as a way for us to kind of immerse ourselves in culture. And then you come back here and you're able to, better relate to the people, and not to mention speak some language and, those type of things. But to the point of the story, we were in several just small town dirt roads, so you're just learning as much as you could and seeing the people and trying to visit the stores, et cetera. Well, here came a funeral. And so it's kind of New Orleans-ish. The casket's on top of the shoulders and they're walking down the streets. And, here we are, obviously not Mexican in this town. And so you're like, I'm not really sure what to do other than just, stand to pay reverence to it. Yeah. But it was interesting to see that process. And, that's their culture basically. And I don't know anything else about the person or how anything about it, but it was just neat to see, I suppose. So
yeah. And Mexico has just an incredibly rich death culture. We're talking about a region that has been taken over and taken over and taken over and taken over. We've got a ton of war, lots of loss, lots of death. When we're in war, of course, it's young men who are going off to deal with the violence. But it's women who have to clean it up. And in Mexico, death is female, which is always just something I think is really cool. And yeah, just people migrating from Mexico to America has changed our death culture. And I would say it's part of the reason that we're starting to see a bigger uptick in home funerals. It's something that they're just culturally closer to. But we are too. We just don't know it. Like my great-grandfather was funeraled on his dining room table. And that, was 50 years ago. It's not that far out. But it's something that when I talk about, I can see people be like, oh my God, a dead body in my home.
It seems that the Mexican culture, what I know of it, really celebrates the death as opposed to grieving or mourning the death. Not that they're not mourning or grieving, but it's I guess like a day of celebration. I don't mean that as
right, not Day of the Dead, but absolutely. There is a closeness with death. And in Mexico, many of those regions, I mean, it's all different, so it's hard to say like this is what they believe. But regionally, you believe your dead ancestors are going to come back. They're going to come see you. You are going to be interacting with them. So it's a different feeling overall. They're not dead forever. They're coming back. We're going to celebrate them. We're going to be with them. We're going to actually go to the cemetery, which I think is a really cool thing that they do. Yeah.
And that, I guess that's where I got into, is it Catholicism? What's their belief system to get them there? And I'll probably ask you that several times, but it doesn't necessarily seem to correlate from what I'm hearing from you, that it's not necessarily a religious piece to it. It's just more of a cultural piece to it.
There's a huge cultural piece. And when you look at the Mayans, when you look at the Aztecs, those are death-forward cultures. The Aztecs had, I think, 18 months and 6 were related to their death. Like that's what you did during that month. So they're very death-forward. And of course, Catholicism comes and there's a ton of death with that, or Cortez, all that. And then they bring, not quite Day of the Dead, but they bring All Souls Day. So that's kind of where that originates, but it's not completely. It's more dichotomous than that. Like we've got Aztec influences, we've got Catholic influences, we have cultural influences. Day of the Dead specifically is a rural holiday. It didn't come into the cities until fairly recently. Like one of my fun factoids is the first Day of the Dead parade that ever occurred in Mexico City was after Spectre, the James Bond film. Because the opening scene is the Day of the Dead parade.
Yeah. That's interesting. And sure enough, when we went to Mexico, there were some celebrations of that. Got to see some cool performances in a restaurant and things like that.
Well, it's just such good imagery and good color palette.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Very visually pleasing.
The dances that they did with the flat wooden shoes, you know, to really highlight the
stomping.
The stomping. Yeah. It was, I mean, I still remember it and probably always will, I suppose. Yeah. You said your grandfather was buried at home. Is that right?
He was funeraled at home.
Yeah. Not buried at home. Funeraled at home. Yeah. Where's he from? Where was that at?
That would be in Salem, Kentucky, which it's like population maybe less than 1,000.
Yeah.
Teeny tiny. It's where my family's from. He passed away while hunting. He was found, brought back to the home. My aunts undressed him, cleaned him up. They rang a bell at the church for able bodies to come dig his grave, and it was over by sunset.
Now you're saying that's 50 some years ago, so that puts us in the 70s. Yeah. Hard to think that 50 years ago is in the 70s, but
yeah,
here we are.
Not that long ago.
It's not that long ago. Where is Salem at geographically?
Near Paducah.
Oh, yeah. It's a little farther west than I expected the answer to be. So my family's originally from the southernmost part of West Virginia.
Okay.
And I can remember Mom talking about some of the funerals at home because that's what you did, right? Now that'd be a little bit farther back than the 70s. It'd be into the 50s and 60s, maybe, or 40s and 50s, something like that. But to your point, this whole idea of the service industry is pretty new.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just, you go back 50 years and most people are going to know how to do it. And now I'd say hardly anybody knows how to do it.
Yeah.
How you care for a body at home.
Yeah. Yeah, there it is.
She's little. There's a Dollar General and a DQ.
Yeah. Any stoplights?
2 stoplights.
2 stoplights. It's a big time. Well, okay. So enter your services then. So we have this funeral industry that's out there. We have a segment of the population that we're all thinking doesn't know really how to manage this. I think the cookie cutter approach to it is my loved one dies by this point in where we are in the society, then the only thing I know is to go contact or maybe pre-contact a funeral home and roll through that.
Right.
I don't know of any other options. And before I ask, let me say this too. Amanda and I got to go see you here recently. Rock House Brewing, I think it was.
One of my poor performances. I'm sorry.
No, it was not. It was fascinating. We didn't know what to expect. And of course, want to show support and everything, but we didn't know what to expect. Never been to Rock House before. So that was
cute.
Oh, it was awesome. We had a great time, and it was nice to see the different places and of course drink some local beer and have a big time with it. But neat place, fascinating place, really, and never knew it was tucked up in there. So I looked up the address. I thought, where in the world is this thing? Yeah, I mean, I know the area really well.
Right. Well, and you feel that way until you're inside, and you're like, okay, this is not an air hanger.
Yeah, when you get inside, it was just comfortable and welcoming, and it was just a good time.
Yeah, they're good folks over there.
It seems like it. Really enjoyed it. But really enjoyed your performance. I don't want to call it performance, but your presentation, I guess I should say. Again, because the topic I think is fascinating to get into it. But all the stuff that you talked about that night, I'd like to cover most of that and whatever else you want to put in, because you really opened my eyes to a whole bunch of different stuff that I had no idea even existed. And up until hearing you, well, I just didn't know they existed. So, I'm going to follow that same cookie cutter approach too. And easy enough for me to say, I don't care what you do with my body, but at the end of the day, I want my wife to do what she wants to do with my body.
Well, and funerals are for the living. Like we
funerals
say
are for the living. That's right.
Really often.
That's right. So somewhere you decide, hey, I'm going to be the Bluegrass Death Doula. You take your class and off you go. And so, so you visit these places. What about the cemeteries? We talked about the funeral home directors being half welcoming. What about the cemeteries? How are they to you?
About health welcoming. I'm a certified green burial expert. So I try and encourage people to bury in a way that I would say is traditional. And it's a way that we're going to optimize decomposition. When I first started this, we didn't have any options for green burial here in Kentucky. And that's changed. But I think initially some of the cemetery directors were a little bit worried about where that was going to go. And others were like, yeah, we really want to do that. Like, we're going to dedicate a section and we're going to get aquamation. And, it's just a big span of things.
I mean, is that a new trend? Green burial, is that a trend?
I don't want to call it a trend. I think it's a thing that people are realizing they can choose. I don't know that people realize that there were different kinds of burial. So, you've introduced a whole nother option here.
I think that's, obviously I don't know what I'm saying, right? So I think that's
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. My job is just to get it out. To your point, I think at this point in life, I would tender a guess to say that most people just know that approach, that death, go to the funeral home and I pay this outrageous price and I want Granny to feel good in the casket. So I buy the $20,000
Titan steel pillow line silk,
all that stuff, and then after listening to you, I felt really connected to the part of the system as we just described really doesn't allow for families to, what am I trying to say, put their own beliefs and cultures and stuff.
Personalize things, make things feel authentic.
And I would go a step further to say, if green is important to you, or, some of the other things that you talked about that night, if those things are important to you, then the current system doesn't provide for that.
No.
And there's no one else to teach anybody. So you just fall into this area, right? I don't call it a trap, but you just fall into this area.
Well, the thing you know to do. So you do the thing.
You do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But enter Lauren, and she's here to say, no, you have options.
We can do some other things.
You can do some other things. So where do you want to start at with? What other things?
I can just kind of go through what I do, and we can go on side tangents as we need.
Yeah, we'll squirrel a lot. Okay, let's do
good.
that. So how do you find your customers?
They usually find me. I always say we don't surprise death doula. We don't do that.
You're not the ambulance chaser?
No, we're not going to do that. And we're always going to start with planning and doing your advanced care directives.
Every time I go to the hospital, I'll be looking for your car now.
It's there a lot. It has a sticker you'll totally know.
Is she selling or helping? Yeah.
I'm helping. But yeah, so we're always going to start with advanced care directives. And that's just your medical directive if you're not able to answer for yourself. I use a form called 5 Wishes. You can absolutely buy that online. They're $5 a piece or 10 for $10. Get 10. Have a fun stocking stuffer. Why not? You might as well get the deal.
So what's 5 Wishes?
So 5 Wishes, what I really like about it is it's an advanced care directive that was developed by the American Bar Association, so lawyers, and the American Hospice Nurse Association, so death professionals. So it's really, really thorough. It's going to cover almost every scenario you can possibly take. It's not just about medication and ventilators and those type of things. It's also how we treat people when they're dying. And really, the document is designed to allow families to have a conversation about what does it look like to care for a dying person. Generationally speaking, we only do that every 20 years or so. So it's not something people are familiar with anyway. And like you said, we're in this industry where we're medicalizing death. We're putting it in a hospital. We're going straight to the funeral director. There's not a lot of personal things happening. So it's something that can be really foreign to people.
And as we're looking at their website that pulled up here, even this is relatively new. I think it said for 25 years, or they've been doing this for 25 years or something like that. And so this is even really a new thing. Yeah.
Well, and if you go into the hospital and you're going to have a procedure that's potentially life-threatening, they will give you an advanced care directive. It's probably 5 questions long. This thing is 15 pages long. So it's very, very different. It accounts for a lot more scenarios, and it has a lot more of care-based things in there.
So when you say scenarios, do you mean advanced life support, or do you want to stay on life support?
Right.
Or not, those type of things?
you're not going to be able to walk, but you might have some brain activity. Do you want to be kept on life support, or do you want to be taken off? Those type of things. Questions that a lot of times people aren't super black and white about. There is this kind of gray area, like, if I'm going to recover in a meaningful way, yeah, but maybe not. Maybe I'm 85.
Right.
I've had enough. So
I'm ready to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's the first thing that you're getting involved with.
Right. That's always where we start. We need you legally protected. I want to know how you want to die, who's going to support you through it. What I love about this document is you sign it, you get 2 witnesses, and we're legally good. You don't have to go to a lawyer. You don't have to go to a notary. You can if you don't have 2 witnesses. Coworkers, neighbors make very good witnesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's really just like a one-stop document where you can do it all.
And so I know you said that the hospital will provide one if you want, but if you come in as the representative for the family and you present this document to the medical staff there at the hospital, how is it received?
So what I encourage people to do is, all of our local hospitals at least use my chart, and you can put it straight into my chart. So that's part of what we do when we're doing this document. We're going to complete it. We're going to scan it into my chart. The next time you go to the doctor, you're going to tell them it's there, and you're going to go over it. If they have it, even if I have to bring it to them, as long as they have it, they're going to follow that document, which can be really, really nice, especially when, if someone's under mental distress and then they're going to call and say, can I take your spouse off of life support?
Right.
It's nice to know that your spouse wants to come off life support.
Do you get questioned by that a lot? I mean, do people question your authority or question a family member about that?
No.
Really?
I think generally medical personnel are happy to see me when I'm there. My people kind of know what's going on. They have a plan. There's somebody there to deal with the emotional element, so it's not going on to the medical staff. Generally, medical staff is very accommodating.
And they're good with this form.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They should know this form. This guy's ubiquitous.
I guess what I'm getting at is it always seems like when you deal with hospitals in the medical industry, at least for getting records, they're so protective and sheltered, and they're so worried, and they're so afraid of legal stuff with it. It just seems, to me, it seems a little atypical that a service provider walks in and is like, well, here's your future doc.
Right. You're
going to follow this document that I just coached them on. And the doctor's like,
people who are suddenly dying. These are people who have been terminally ill or are of advanced age. So it's not like, I'm walking in, it's a 19-year-old kid or anything like that. It's usually someone that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we know what's going on here.
Well, and that makes sense. That makes sense, but not always though, right? Or is it?
I am very rarely called in during a sudden death. I usually will come after at that point.
Well, I guess that gets to the point of the service planning.
Right. Yeah. So we start with advanced care directives, but part of my advanced care directives is we go through basic funeral and end of life planning. So we're going to talk about all the different forms of disposition you can choose, all the different types of funerals you can choose. If you want a funeral, do you want flowers? Do you want people to take someone to lunch in lieu of flowers? Stuff like that. So we're really going to make it a lot more personal. We're going to go ahead and gather your basic eulogy information too. When I write eulogies, the thing that takes the longest is all like he was born in 1967. Like that's the part that takes so long. So if we've already got that all covered, I can go get all the good stories and write something really great.
Yeah.
So we just try and be in a really prepared place for when it comes.
Yeah. Back to the hospital piece for a quick second, then we'll move on. But I forgot what Stacy used to call herself, the angel of death or something like that. But she always took the approach of no one in the hospital is having these discussions with loved ones, whether sudden or whether not. And so somehow she found her way to be that person. Some of it was because of her roles that she had in the hospital, but she found her role to be that person. Nowhere near this. I'm not comparing.
Right. Well, somebody has to bring it up.
Somebody has to talk. And she's like, this is what it's going to look like for your family member. When you were talking about life support or whatever, those were those conversations to say, here's the risk and here's what it looks like. And here's what you need to consider. And here's what it will look like with option A. And here's what it will look like with option B. And I've always admired that, right? Because that's a really tough place to be. And
it's again, like it's a dice roll. You might have a Stacy and you might not. They might just be like, pick.
Yeah. If even that. If even that. Wow. Okay. So I like the idea. You've got everything planned and we know what we're going to do. And then where do you go next? So you said I can go out and get the good stories, but there's a lot more that you're doing than that.
Right. So from there, I usually go into legacy projects. And a legacy project is something you deliberately create for you to be remembered by. I had a professor who did a last lecture. I have had a quilter who did a show of her quilts. I keep my zinnia seeds and give them out to my friends. I have a little cookbook that I write every recipe my son really loves in that he'll take with him. You know, it's just little things, or it can be something really, really large. It doesn't really, It's something choose your own adventure kind of thing. But it can also be a really great opportunity for people to review their life, look at what they've accomplished, go through their photographs, just see what they've lived. They can be really, really meaningful, really helpful experiences. They're things I encourage people to include their entire families in. There's some really awesome products out there too that will help people do this. Like one's called Storyworthy. They send you an email every week to help you write a book about your life. And then at the end of a year, you have your biography written.
I have one of those going.
Great.
Speak.
Yeah. And those are great. Those are great alternatives, especially if you need that little little push to do it.
Yeah, I need some push. I'm about 5 months late.
Oh, no.
But I'll get there. My daughter's trying to give me all the hints to get it done. I know. I got to finish that.
Yeah.
Like 6 or 7.
Definitely worth it. And just such a great keepsake.
Yeah, that's right. So when you're dealing with this legacy project and you're working with the person soon to be passing, what's their emotions like when you're doing this?
It's not always people who are imminently dying. They're just people who kind of want to put things in order.
Okay.
Legacy projects can be really emotional because it can be a life review. It can also be really, really fun. It's one of those things where like all the naughty little stories things trickle out while you're doing it. So it can be a really fun experience. I think a lot of people don't consider themselves creative, but when we start talking, you're like, you're a writer and an artist? What? So people have all these talents, and it's all sorts of crazy things that people could do, but it's just really cool to see the huge variety of them and what they want to share and what they want, people to remember about them.
You have any good, shocking stories that they shared that you can share here?
Oh man.
This one time back in band camp or.
Oh, nothing I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah,
I saw the naval ships arrive and don't ask any questions. What happened?
Or go throw this box away. Don't ask what's in the box. Just go throw it away.
Yeah, I've heard of some of those boxes. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice one that's in a box.
I've been told that a time or two. If something happens, I've got this box. Please go find it. Like, okay.
Delete my internet history.
Yeah, I'll find the box for you. That's my job. So. So then I guess it really depends on the person, the personality, how they're going to approach it. So I would think if it's a planning thing, right, not this imminent death that we were talking about, but a planning thing, that to me would feel more fun or celebratory to participate in.
Absolutely. And yeah, when we are kind of on a time schedule, like there are certain diagnoses when people mention that they have like pancreatic cancer or something, I'm like, oh, we gotta get things moving. And that might just be like, we're going to label your photographs, but that's still a really great legacy project.
Yeah.
Your friend's mom or grandmother, what we did was kind of started labeling the things she wanted other people to have. And in that she was telling stories like, this is why I want this person to have this thing. And, that's also just a really nice way to spend time with someone who is on their way out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting. How do you deal with the emotions of that? I mean, that's got to be a tough place to be sometimes.
I mean, a lot of the time when it is an emotionally charged environment, I think people really value if I am emotional because in a way it gives them permission to be emotional. And of course, like I'm not going to have a complete breakdown or anything, but shed a tear or two, I think that's fine. And, it's sad. So let's be sad. That's totally fine.
Well, that may be your biggest lesson.
Sure. Just kind of lean into it, feel your feels. If you don't, they don't go away. You get grief bubbles and then weird things happen.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it personally? How do you ride this emotional roller coaster personally?
I get a lot of, pleasure is not the right word. I find a lot of peace in what I do. It's very rare that I'll come in and do an advanced care directive. And when I leave, you can see that people have relaxed and they feel better. And they feel like they have a plan. They're feeling more organized. It's a great service to provide, and it's a pleasure to do it because it does bring people so much peace and confidence, even just I can do this. I am able to do this.
Yeah. What a great, I don't know what the terms are. I'm just going to say the stuff. You can fix it.
That's fine.
Crutch or emotional support person. I was thinking an emotional support dog, but
kind of. I kind of think of myself as an event planner, but a weird event planner. You go here, you do this, you do that.
Yeah, an event planner. What a great way to think of it.
Move things around, keep things going.
Yeah. Do you find it's a heavy topic to be an event planner for? Let's talk a minute about sex. Sex is part of life. It's beautiful and it's essential to living a great life. Enter my friends at Shameless Care, who have created something cool for your personal health care. Shameless Care offers a variety of products you may be interested in. ED treatments, STI treatments, STD testing. So how does it work? Well, that's the easy part. You go to shamelesscare.com, you choose the product you're interested in, you complete an online questionnaire, which is reviewed by a medical doctor, by the way. Pay for the product, and in a couple of days, discreet packaging arrives right to your doorstep. Their customer service is second to none. They're always responsive, and they care. Listen, Ashley's the best. Tell her I said hello. They're a small business ran by people like you and me, and they're incredible. And the best part? We can save you some money. Click on the link in the show notes. Use the code JUDE at checkout. It's JUDE. And save $30 on your first purchase. That's not bad, huh? Visit our website to learn more. Shamelesscare.com. And don't forget the promo code JUDE.
I don't think death is a heavy topic. I think other people think death is a heavy topic, but it is absolutely going to happen, which for me is sort of it's like being afraid of breathing. It is going to happen. You can't live that way. And I can't recall their name, but there is an author that I really like who says you cannot fully live until you plan for your end. You have to have that plan in place in order to live fully. And I agree with that. That I think if you don't, it's always in the back of your head. It's something you always know, even if you're not being surface about it, talking about it, it's always there. So making these plans gives people a lot of freedom, gives them a lot of confidence. And it kind of gives, it's a way to think about yourself, maybe I do want to be a tree, or maybe I do want to be a Viking. I don't know. It's just something, it's kind of nice.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I'm one of the ones that says it's a really heavy topic. And because it's heavy, I avoid it. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want to think about it. Although I agree with everything you've been talking about and planning. And, again, I kind of joke, I don't care what you do with my body, and it doesn't make a difference to me. But, that's not a fair response to me. I think that's just my deflection of, how I view this topic.
Mm-hmm. And that's very, very common. I'd say that's almost normal at this point. We'll avoid it and we won't deal with it. And then we'll be weirded out when it doesn't go great. But the thing I always say is it won't kill you, I promise. And it can actually be kind of fun. I had a couple of clients a couple of weekends ago, and they did have a diagnosis involved. So there was, a bit of heaviness there, but we had so much fun doing their advanced care directives. Yeah. Because it can be kind of funny and silly, and because it's life, and life is funny and silly and weird. And it's just another extension of that.
I would imagine that would have to be just I'm not saying it because you're sitting in front of me, but you would have to be this ray of light. Otherwise, in a dark place for these families, right? Because we all know death is coming,
right?
And it is coming, and we don't know when it's coming most of the time, right? Sometimes we do, but in those darkest times, it feels like, in the saddest times, you would have to be this ray of light, not just your personality as I'm learning, but the things that you're talking about doing would have to bring some level of solace and comfort to the family. I would think that the family you just referenced is probably still talking about you to this day.
Oh, they wrote a very nice Facebook post.
5 stars.
And ray of light is very nice. But I think people expect me to be like dressed in black and have long gray hair and be a little bit more solemn. And
you don't look goth at all.
No. And I'm real goofy. I'm just sort of a silly person. I'm going to laugh even when it's grossly inappropriate to do it. So I think I get away with a lot because they're like, oh, this is not what I thought would be happening right now.
I've never thought about a Yelp review or something for you.
Please don't. Yeah. I can't manage another social profile.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. All right, next step in your process.
Okay, so we've done legacy projects. Next step is going to be comfort therapy. Along with my doula certification, I also did I did meditation certification. I did sound bowl certification. I do hand massage and I do Reiki. I will come provide those services to you, and you can pay me to do that if you'd like. But I also am going to teach your loved ones how they can apply those services without me there. So for sound therapy, are you familiar with sound bowls?
No. Is that the thing? You take the wooden thingy around, it makes a tone?
So the tone they make is the same tone you hear when you're in the forest. So your little monkey brain is like, okay, we're outside and we're going to be aware of our surroundings, and it's not going to think. You stop thinking. And that's really what happens.
Do we have audio of that? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a weird kind of alien sound, but what happens is your brain stops thought process. You're just relaxing. People fall asleep all of the time, which I always think is a really great compliment, to fall asleep with a stranger in your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can get on, just like you're doing now, you can get on Google, you can get on Spotify, and you can pull up a ton of different sound meditations. I write personalized meditations, but you can also, find people guiding meditation online. You can do all this stuff. Aromatherapy. I spent months in aromatherapy school. Don't do that. They're pre-blended. You don't need to just buy the blend you like. You don't have to mix it up. It doesn't make it any more special.
So you're helping then with this, just to help relax and
and what we do when we feel uncomfortable. So I'm here with you and you're dying and we're sitting here together. What are we going to do? This gives you some options of what you can do.
I think we have some sound.
Cool.
So this looks like, is it a special bowl of some sort?
So this person is playing Tibetan brass bowls, and the smaller the bowl, the deeper the tone, or the higher the tone, excuse me. Yeah. I play crystal bowls. I didn't choose the brass bowls because to me, they're a little bit spookier sounding. So I went with crystal just because it's more of a deeper, fuller sound. When we're using them in person, we can also use the vibrations they make. So we can play them on different parts of the body, or we might just play them close, and they can kind of help with the relaxation as well.
How do you determine that? I mean, are you trying to target an area?
Sometimes. Yeah. I mean, I am very much like, we're going to personalize this to you, and we're going to do what you want to do and what makes you comfortable. And if you want to sit here and play with them and get experimental, let's go. If you want to lay down and fall asleep, let's do it. There you go.
So this is the crystal.
Yeah.
And what is the stick? What is the stick?
It's just a stick covered in suede, and the outside of the bowls are textured, so it causes the friction to make the sound.
Okay, so that's a wooden stick with
suede
over top of it.
They sound cooler than this in person.
Oh, yeah. And how's that? Is it received well?
Yeah, I think it's just something to do. And I think, especially with comfort therapy, that's what we're going for. We're looking for something that we can do that might make you more comfortable. really I couldn't narrow it down to one thing I wanted to do, because I realized that people just wanted someone to pay attention to them a lot of the time. Just a person making an effort to make you feel better is what made that person feel better, in my opinion, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I tried to pick a lot of different things that I could help people learn how to do or check out, just try.
Yeah. You know, that's an equally sad comment in a way. People just looking for someone to spend some time.
Yeah.
I know it's not the real intent of what that comment was, but it does kind of speak to society, I guess. I mean, everybody's so busy that it's hard to come in and spend that quality time, because you still have stuff that you got to pay your bills for. You still got to go to work. Right. You still got to do those things. And it feels like the way is just this rushed, let me go spend the last 30 minutes with Papa or whoever.
And I'm going to stand in the corner with my arms folded.
Yeah.
Because we can be a little bit touch phobic as a society, I think, especially when a person is dying. And that's one of the bigger hurdles for people who have someone dying in their home. You know, it's like, I always say, you have to meet them where they're at. If they're sleeping all the time, take a nap with them. But you have to be willing to lay down with them to do that, you know?
Yeah. 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 And you meet those people, of course, but there's others that aren't capable of doing it for whatever the reason, right, wrong, or different. Talk about Reiki just for a minute. How does that work for these clients?
My mother is a Reiki master, so this is something I grew up with. And when I was a kid, it would like drive me absolutely insane, because I'd be like, I don't feel good. And she'd be like, let me Reiki you. No, I want medicine. But as an adult, so what we're doing with Reiki is it's low to no touch, which can be really important, especially if a person is terminally ill or, you know, whatever they have going on. Touch doesn't always work great with dying. So we're doing an energy transfer. We're also going to look at your chakras and try and align them the best we can. I don't know how else to explain it as to how I was taught, but you stand with your hand on the person's forehead and you imagine a white light coming through your body and going through your hands into their body. And then you just talk about what you see in their aura and their chakras. You can sweep them, get them back in shape.
Let's back up a step on that.
Sure.
I know very, very little about it because someone keeps trying to get me to go.
We can do so.
Yeah. No, I'm afraid of what.
I'm doing it right now. You don't even know it.
Oh, gosh. Good luck to you. You may be. I'm not responsible for the black rays of whatever shooting out at me. But let's talk about what it is. What is Reiki?
It's an energy transfer. It's me giving my energy to you. And people do, I believe, have a unique energy profile. You know, I don't want to get into like the science and is it real, but
right.
I don't know. It's fun and it makes people feel better, so we're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's the right answer.
But the idea is I'm going to give my energy to you to help replenish your energy.
Why is that important into life?
Well, you're very low energy, part of it. But I also think it's just part of, you know, having someone focus on your body like that, having someone have that intent to share with you, that can be really, really meaningful. Well, and the pace of it too. Like you said, everything is so fast. And if you're dealing with that in a hospital setting and then someone's going to come there and stand with their hands over you for an hour, like that's a very big pace shift.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's received well. I mean, I guess it has to be, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always give options, so I'm never going to come and be like, this is what we're doing. But the people who like it really, really like it. And yeah, it can just be kind of a comforting, nice thing on par with the massage. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I would imagine a lot of people that you're working with are not familiar with Reiki.
It kind of depends on the age group. Yeah. Older clients tend not to be, but they also tend to be the ones who are like, yeah, let's get all the things out. Get all your witch stuff. Go take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Neat. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I keep saying I'm going to go, and maybe one day I will, but I think I'm afraid to go. Yeah. Amanda's shaking her head. No, I won't. But I think I'm fearful of it. I don't know.
What are you fearful of?
I don't know. I think there's a part of me that's locked away and I don't know what to do with it.
Well, they're probably not going to unlock it immediately.
That may be helpful. I don't know. They may hit the right lock the first time, though. I asked Amanda once if she'd go hold my hand. She's like, yeah, I'll go right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, nope.
We're going to do a little bit.
You called my bluff. I think I'm busy. I think the phone will ring about
I
that.
told you I'm doing it right now.
All right. So next step, you're
okay. So we've done comfort therapy, and then we're going to move into vigiling. What I do with vigil education is I talk to people about what death looks like. You probably haven't seen a person die, and sometimes it can be very peaceful, and sometimes it's not. People with a lot of like stomach cancer, stomach issues, you might see purge. Just things happen. The death rattle breathing, that's very much true. That's an upsetting sound. But if you know it's going to happen and you know it's normal, that can be helpful.
Yeah.
So we talk about all those things, the different things you're going to see.
To both the family and are the clients, patients, customers? What are the?
I say clients.
Okay.
I'm not medical, so they're not patients. But if they want to be involved, then they're involved. If they don't want to be involved, then they're not. Just sort of depends. Well, and that, mentally where people are at that point, it's not always appropriate to have that option.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, so we're going to talk about what death looks like, what to expect, what to do. So if you're under hospice care, we don't call 911 anymore. You have a special line with a hospice nurse that you call. That can be a hard lesson for a lot of people because if you call 911, as you know, it's an emergency at that point.
Right.
And they've got to come.
Yeah.
And just that happening can be enough to kill somebody sometimes. So we try and make sure everyone knows, like, this is what we do. These are the procedures. This is what things look like. This is when you do need to call. This is when you don't need to, get all that set up. And then we do what's called death nesting. And that's where, regardless of where you are, so if you're at home, great. If you're in a hospital, we'll work with that. We're going to get all your favorite things and make sure they're with you. We're going to make sure you have your pillow. We're going to make sure you have your blanket, your slippers. If you have a lamp you love, I'll go get it. We're going to make sure your pets are coming in to say goodbye. Just make sure that you have things that are really of value to you that you find pleasure in around you. Collect books, music, all sorts of stuff, just so we kind of create your own little space for you to pass in.
Yeah. Our family's pretty receptive to you. I'd imagine they are, but
yeah.
Do you have difficult family members from time to time?
Oh, yeah. When I first started, I was working with a group who was doing loss through addiction. And a lot of them were people who they just never saw this person again. Like they were just gone one day. And that it was pretty wild. Like it got pretty rough. I learned a lot of things to put in my contract from that experience. You can cuss at me, but you can't throw things at me.
I've got to draw a line somewhere.
But yeah, there are people who are hardly charged, and there, of course, are people who don't know who I am or what I'm doing there, and that's always can be bumpy sometimes. Like, I don't have any drugs. I don't have anything to offer here. I'm just here to make sure you have breakfast in the morning, and when this person actually passes, I'll go call the hospice nurse, and you guys are going to sit down for a minute.
Yeah. With this advanced care directive, that you have, how do families react to that? In theory, it seems like it's well planned out and well coached out, and we're all on board until it happens. Right.
And I don't think part of that document is deciding who is going to make those decisions, who's going to make those calls for you when you're in that state. I don't think people always realize what next of kin looks like. In Kentucky, it spreads unless you're married. If you're married, it goes to one person. But, you might be in a situation where you have 4 siblings who want different things for their end-of-life care for their mom. And that's when things get really crazy. So that's where that document really, really protects people. But yeah, I don't think people always realize how quickly those situations can occur.
Sure.
And I think people also assume that you're going to be you in this moment, even though you're grieving. And grieving people are not themselves. They are not normal. They are not going to behave in a normal way. It's not what happens. But we have that expectation. And, things just fall apart very, very quickly.
So do you step in at that point? Or are you kind of the referee at that point? Do you
I can be. Usually if you've called me in, you already kind of know what you're doing. You have a little bit of an idea. You're open to planning. But yeah, I've heard some pretty horrible stories. And that sometimes is why people contact me before they need to, because they don't want to do that again.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That they need that planning up front, and hopefully everybody gets on board at that point.
Well, and that is probably, I'm just realizing now, but that's a pretty good chunk of my people. They've had some sort of traumatic experience and they don't want to do that again. So we're going to do what we can to not do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. All right. What's next? Where are we going next?
So we've done our vigil education. Then we're going to go into our funeral planning. I am a celebrant, so I can marry you and I can funeral you.
Life's one-stop shop.
Yeah, exactly. If you really want to lean into the till death do us part stuff, I'm your girl.
I'll be there.
So we start with that. I really encourage people, like we've been talking, to make it authentic, to make it something that really speaks to who your person was. And it can be something small. Like we might talk about everyone should wear red to the funeral because that was her favorite color, those type of things. But those teeny details that take minimal effort, you just need somebody to be there to be like, we can do that.
Yeah.
They can make a really, really big difference. So yeah, we're going to get your eulogy done. We're going to get your obit done. I will speak your eulogy, but if you have a family member who wants to, but is nervous about doing it, I do what's called ghost service. So I just kind of hang out and I know the flow of things. And if somebody gets too overcome to continue, I'll come take over. And from there, it might, depends on what your disposition option was. But I mean, yeah, there's tons of different things that could go into funeral planning.
Yeah.
Do we want to go through disposition options?
Yeah, let's jump into a little bit of those.
Okay.
Is that next on our list?
I mean, it's in there. It's just sort of, it's a squirrel, as you said.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So we have what I call conventional burial, and that's, burial and funeral that we all know. In a conventional burial, you're going to be buried at 6 feet. You're going to be buried most likely in a steel casket that is sealed. That casket will go into a concrete liner, and then that liner will be covered with a vault. So you have layer after layer after layer. You're typically buried in a cemetery.
What's the purpose of the layers?
So the grass doesn't fall. It's easier to mow the grass. That's it. That's really that's the answer.
Well, all right.
Yeah. So when we dig a grave, the soil, of course, gets air added. And as it resettles after a grave is filled, it will divot sometimes if you don't make a mound, which they don't in conventional cemeteries. But in green cemeteries, we do. But yeah, those vaults, those are just, and they'll say like it's for grave robbing. But if you've ever dug a grave, I promise you're not going to rob a grave. That is a big effort.
I'm not saying they don't exist, but I've never once heard of a grave robbery.
Right.
In reality,
you're going to have a backhoe. You're going to have a backhoe. Or just a lot of determination.
Yeah. And I've been a part of, or I have known about exhuming. Yeah, that's not an easy process. It's not like you and I are sneaking over to the cemetery tonight and digging up hidden treasures. I mean, that's a significant process to exhume.
Right. Well, and what happens is all those pockets, so our vault and our liner and all that all fills with water over time. It's not like you're nice and safe and dry in a little underground tomb. That's not what happens. You fill up with water.
Even in a casket?
Probably not. Well, maybe. You never know. When you see those exhibitions, a lot of times you'll see they're wet when they pull them out, and it's because there's water caught in that pocket. So yeah, that's conventional burial. We're of course using tons of materials that don't erode, that could possibly be used other places. A lot of steel, a lot of wood. We are also using chemicals because bodies are traditionally embalmed for us that aren't great for fish and wildlife. They aren't really helping us a lot, but that's sort of our go-to option. From there, we have natural burial. Natural burial, we're going to bury you at 3.5 feet. You're still going to exchange oxygen with the surface at that level. 3.5 feet universally is where the mother mycelial layer is. That's where our mushroom creepy crawly friends are all living. We're going to use a container that biodegrades. So it might be something as easy as a cotton shroud. We might use a cardboard cremation box, which those are $250. They give families the opportunity to personalize. That's one of my favorite things that people have started doing is you'll go get this cremation box and everybody will paint and sign it and do all sorts of cool stuff. Much cooler than a casket. Or it might just be like a pine box. It's just something that we know is going to decompose over time. And yeah, you're just buried, direct contact with the soil. The body will usually decompose within 4 to 6 months. And so off you go.
How far decompose?
Like, will bones decompose? Is that what you're asking?
Well, in the 4 to 6 months, what's left of a body in 4 to 6 months? Natural bones.
Not cartilagey bits, mostly bones. But that depends on your soil content. And I mean, there's all sorts of different, which, as a police officer, I'm sure you're aware, you can find bodies in all sorts of conditions. So from there, we have cremation. Cremation is our largest growing point of disposition. It's really affordable. It also gives families a much more flexible timeline. If we know you've been cremated, we don't have to hurry for anything. You can do a memorial when you feel up to it. And that's something I really encourage families to do too. Like, there's no wrong or right here. You do what feels good for you, and you're doing it right at that point.
Yeah.
Cremation does have a bit of an environmental impact. It's the same carbon emissions as about a 500-mile car ride. So that, it's not perfect, but in terms of space, in terms of costs, cremation is kind of up there at this point. From there, we have aquamation or water cremation. It's not yet legal in Kentucky. I hope we have it soon. It's one of those things that, like, it's being marketed as this brand new technology, but it's actually a farm technology out of 1891. It was for the disposition of animal bodies. What we do is we have a chamber. We put the body in. It looks like an iron lung. That chamber is then filled with water, agitated, and lye and oxygen are added over time. And you decompose very much as you would naturally, just on a quicker time scale. What's left are bright white bone fragments because it's just bone. There's no carbon released from the burning. The cremains feel like flour. They're soft. They're not like hard. But yeah, it's very low environmental impact and just a more gentle process. There are people for religious and non-religious reasons who do not want to be burned. So we have aquamation there.
And how long does that process take? The same as cremation?
It's dependent on body size, and I believe it's anywhere from like 6 to 12 hours.
So that's not long at all.
No, probably doing a couple of days.
Yeah. I believe you said in your presentation it's in South Carolina.
We have one in or closest is South Carolina. I believe Illinois also has it. So it's not like entirely unobtainable, but we don't have it yet in Kentucky. The controversy is what you do with the water afterwards. It's actually a fantastic fertilizer. A lot of these places are partnering with flower farms. So they'll come and they'll pick up the water and use it on their farm. So you get to go be a plant or a flower or whatever.
So Uncle Delbert can be the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the point of controversy is what we do with the water.
And so why are other states not on board with that?
It has to go through legislation. And here we have a predominantly Republican legislation. And it's just hard to get anything labeled as green or, environmentally friendly through there. But for me, all these things are more traditional. Like green burial is how we traditionally bury people.
Yeah.
Aquamation is before cremation. We could do that ahead of time.
I mean, is it cost prohibitive? Is it
No. It's marginally more expensive than cremation. And of course, you'd have to pay to be transported if you were choosing it in Kentucky. But it's not horribly expensive.
Well, that was my next question. Can I go to Illinois or South Carolina and have this done?
Sure.
And then just send my stuff back here?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think that's interesting. It seems like an easy solution. It seems like, I mean, if you can move it to a fertilizer type of environment, that seems fairly easy enough, especially with all the co-ops and as ag centered as Kentucky wants to be for whatever the industry happens to be.
Right.
Seems like there's a pretty natural place to move that product. So
I agree.
Is it just lack of education or lack of information on behalf of the legislature?
I think somebody just has to introduce it. And I have flirted with that idea, but I am.
So do you know any former grant writers who would?
Any lawyers who like working for free?
Be crafty with your wording. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's exactly where we're at with it. Like, it's not green. It's traditional.
Yeah. 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 Interesting.
But like you were saying, these the end products of this are really easy to deal with, but it is firmly my belief that before it's all said and done, our main point of disposition will be human composting. It's just too easy to deal with. What happens in human composting is a body goes into what looks like a chest freezer. There's brown matter, so like wood, those type of things, green matter, leaves, those type of things, the body, more green matter, more wood. That chamber is pumped with nitrogen and oxygen and rotated. And over time, your body just turns to soil. A lot of times the bones will go too. If not, they're put through what's called a cremulator. It just mixes your bones up and then they mix it into soil. The different facilities now are partnered with different parks. So any soil your family doesn't take, you go be part of the park system.
What do you mean by that?
Like if Jacobson Park is building a new flower bed, they might take, the composted soil and use that there.
I see. Yeah. So there's a way here for your body actually to become the earth.
Exactly.
Which is the natural thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, to become the earth and then still be accessible. Like when we're doing natural burial, you very much are going into the earth. But here, you get to kind of choose where that soil goes. And I had a client recently that was her stop with natural burial. She had multiple places she wanted her body to be. And she did end up choosing human composting, which, I mean, right now it's at a boutique level. It is incredibly expensive. It's a big trip. You're going to go to Oregon or Washington to have it done now. But it's getting closer and closer and closer.
Washington State? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how long did you say that process takes?
It can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months.
Yeah. So the facility has to be capable, I suppose. I mean,
and they have to have space. I mean, those pods are all there. You can see there's not a ton of them.
Is that a pod per person? Is that what we're looking at there? Mm-hmm. That's not, I guess I'm looking at it, but that's not exactly what I expected out of it. So
it's a really beautiful facility and they've based it on a beehive. So it has all those like hexagons and stuff.
Yeah. Have you been there?
I have not been there, but I have talked to their owner, who is this woman right here. Whose name I cannot recall off the top of my head. And
that says Illinois, or that's where the story's at. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So, that's different than what I was expecting. And so for those.
And yeah, I mean, here, the families come in, they've decorated the container. It can be a really kind of beautiful, meaningful thing too.
So let's describe this for whoever's listening and looking at this. So what we're looking at is a picture of, in a beehive is a honeycomb is really probably the way to visualize this thing. And in this particular picture, there's 10 pods in this honeycomb. And so you're basically placed on some type of stretcher-esque.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a file cabinet drawer.
Like a sliding file cabinet drawer. Yeah.
Mausoleums do too.
That's right. Yeah. The morgues all have the sliding roller thing. And so the family can come in and decorate that and prepare the space for your body. So they get the opportunity to.
Right. Any green material. So flowers, anything that's going to decompose, they can use.
Okay. And so then you would slide the table into the honeycomb, seal it up. Mm-hmm. And I guess there's a scientific formula for we're coming back in June or.
Yep. And they just kind of keep an eye on it. You can see kind of there in the middle.
This one here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the people who run the facility will kind of keep an eye on things. They'll kind of decide when it's time to start rotating the soil, those type of things.
What do you mean by rotating the soil?
There's a point of decomposition, just like your compost at home, where you're going to flip things, introduce more air, and just help aid decomposition along.
So then the workers will have to open up the honeycomb, slide it out, move the soil
I believe they're fancy enough you just turn them.
Oh.
I think.
That would make more sense because I was thinking, man, there's a lot that goes into, you don't want to just open that.
Right. And you don't want to just like take a pitchfork to it either.
Yeah. Not to mention breathing, or what that would be my concern.
Right,
okay, what am I breathing?
There's some smells.
There's some smells. So in that contraption, in that honeycomb, then they can just rotate it around, and at the end of the day, I guess 4 to 6 months, you come out with dirt. Mm-hmm. Yep. We return to the earth, basically.
Your earth.
Yeah. I've never heard of this until you started talking about it. I had no idea.
It's kind of up and aquamation is up and coming too, and they've had their moments. Like Desmond Tutu, he chose aquamation when he passed, and that was sort of like a moment for that.
Sure. Now, we don't have the honeycombs here.
We don't. It's it's just got to get through legislation. Someone has to legalize it. But yeah, if you have money, absolutely. This is where we're going. I feel pretty confidently that this is where we're going. So when you say you have money, what do you mean? Is this expensive? Like if you can invest into it, absolutely invest into human composting.
Well, that's the certainty that's facing all of us, right? Is raw death.
There's going to be a market.
Yeah, that's right. We say the same thing about our criminal defense work, right? There's always going to be a market, unfortunately. So, yeah, I guess death there's always going to be a market for that.
Yeah.
Now, in these pictures that we're looking at, we're seeing the bags here that this gentleman has in his hands. You would come out with a lot more dirt than that. That's just
if you're not in state, part of the package is they ship a pound of the dirt home, but you can have as much of that dirt as you want. So if your family wants to rent a big old truck and go get it, do it.
Well, that begs the question then, if you have a 200-pound person, how much dirt are they making?
I'm not sure. Bodies are interesting in that way.
Yeah.
You can have a really big person who doesn't have a ton of cremains, and you can have a very tiny person who
has a bunch.
I had a client who was a very, very, very petite person, and when we went to pick up her cremains, it was a big box, and she just had dense bones, but it was just interesting because it wasn't what you expected at all.
Oh my gosh! So we just looked this up here. How much soil, whatever, dirt does a 200-pound person yield, right? Become, and this says one naturally reduced human body can yield from 250 to 1,000 pounds of soil, depending on the method used and the type of volume of organic materials. So no wonder when you said use a pickup or a truck, it says right there.
Yeah,
you can feel
going to need it.
Going to need it. Huh.
But it's also not just the body. We're also adding wood. We're adding green matter. We're adding all these other things as well. So it's a body plus some stuff.
Sure. So this one says a body is approximately...
You're not going to turn out to be 1,000 pounds.
It'd probably be my family's last joke. Like, let's put some solid oak stumps in there or something. So it comes out 1 cubic yard, which is 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, is basically what the human body is going to create. Huh. How interesting is that?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is crazy.
But also one of those things you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly where I'm at.
Yeah.
How interesting to be able to, and that's surprising that we're kind of in the middle of the Bible Belt. Well, we're smack dab in the middle of it. With all the different religions and thoughts and those things that go with that, it's really interesting that this is not already here. Right? Because some of those teachings are you return back to the earth. And
you're very accurate. But, somebody's got to do the legislation.
Yeah. Very odd that it's just not in place yet.
Yeah. It's odd to me, too, that you need legislation for something like because it's on the surface.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Let me go back to these home funeral parts. Now, we can still do a home funeral.
Mm-hmm. Home funerals are legal in all 50 states. You're protected by the funeral rule, and that's what the funeral rule says. It's a federal law that says you, as a consumer, do not have to employ a funeral director to handle your dead. You can do that by yourself if you want to.
Did you see recently that if you bury somebody in your backyard, you get these tax benefits of that?
Yeah.
Didn't that come from... wasn't that in the news recently with Donald Trump or something like that?
his golf course.
In the golf course, yeah.
So you can bury at home. It's going to depend on your county zoning. If you're in Fayette County, you're probably not going to bury at home. If you're in Rockcastle, knock yourself out.
Because who knows who's buried there.
Right.
There's certain parts of Kentucky that's probably been doing that for a long time.
Absolutely. Well, and it's one of my earlier doula experiences was with a client who they had no money. There was none, like for real, no money. And we were like, what do you do? We figured out we could do a home burial, and they were able to keep their loved one at home. And, it turned out to be a really great thing. So yeah, there are some tax benefits to it, but it can also be a really meaningful thing for your family. It's a grave you actually visit, which I think is always a nice thing. It's something that's developed for me kind of unexpectedly as a green burial person. Like, people want to bury at home, but they don't know how to dig a grave.
Yeah.
So I get employed to do those type of things sometimes.
To build the, or to,
to show people
grave?
how to dig a grave, and like, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it.
Wow. I wonder why people don't do more, I guess because they may be nomadic in culture and say, I may want to move one day, or.
Yeah. And I mean, county zoning does kind of limit who can. Usually if you're zoned for agriculture, you can bury. So, you're limited to people who have that kind of property. Yeah. Though I have seen a few groups of people who are like, we're just going to buy an acre of property out in the middle of nowhere. And, it's $5,000 for the acre, and we're just going to bury our family there. And that's what's there.
That's a pretty deep topic, really. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment, is to say, I kind of dig that. No pun intended, or maybe I do mean pun intended, right?
Well, and I will say, when we do natural burial, we do encourage the family to dig with us. And there is this physical component of grief that comes out. And that is really powerful, I think is the right word. Like, you kind of see people go through the stages of just like being able to kind of work through the anger and work through the sadness, but needing that physical release to do it. And it is a big job to do. And I think people take a lot of pride in having contributed to it.
Certainly. So are you hand shoveling at this point, or are you bringing in a backhoe? Or, I mean,
I hand shovel because I don't have a backhoe.
That just goes into your packages.
Right. I mean, if you have a backhoe handy, you're insane if you're going to dig a grave, and it's very hard. Yeah. And I think what people don't realize is, like, the soil you dig when you garden, that's the topsoil. That's that first 6 inches or so. It's much, much softer. The deeper you go, the harder it gets. And there's a rock layer. Like, you're going to break through a rock layer even at 3.5 feet. So it is a really hard job.
How do you do that? How do you accomplish that? You have to have help.
Oh, God, yeah. Or like a lot of time with no rain. Ibuprofen.
I like the concept of the home burial, because your loved one would then be right there, visiting the grave and all those things. They're just right there at your property. They're just there.
Yeah. I have a friend who has her mother and her partner are both buried on her driveway. And she can say hi and bye to them every morning as she comes in and out. And it's comforting for her.
I guess at that point you could probably put them wherever you wanted them. Yeah,
as long as your property's owned correctly, you can go nuts.
Not 30 feet within the Columbia gas line, I guess, but what a shock for them, right?
Surprise.
Surprise. How do families deal with that? I mean, I'm thinking of my house. I don't know my house that will ever always stay in the family. So I guess that leads us to being in a cemetery somewhere, but we don't have a big farm. We don't have a homestead. We don't have those things that exist. And so sometime when my wife and I both die, then my daughter can decide to do whatever she wants to with us. But,
like leaving the property, is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Yeah. If mom and dad are buried on the backyard and we only have like an acre.
Yeah. Well, they're probably not there anymore because they've decomposed and they've joined the grass, and, the deers have eaten the grass, and we're all being chemicals. And that's where it becomes beautiful and fun that, we're just there to rest. We're not there forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent point. We're only there for a really short period of time. You decompose and get out pretty quick. Do you have to disclose that on a lead paint on a home seller form?
I think that's probably best practice, but I honestly don't think you have to.
Anything else about this? Yeah, Dad's out by the oak tree.
Grandma. We're just going to do some digging. Don't look over here.
Yeah. How long's it been before you plant that bush? Yeah. But don't dig back there for a while.
Best practice.
Yeah. I didn't tell you this before closing, but now that we've closed.
Joke's on you.
Yeah, Mom and Dad's back there in the back by the fence.
Sucker.
You'll see the coyotes. You'll see the things come up there. Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly something that comes up. And historically speaking, there are properties that have old cemeteries on them all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
So, they do get abandoned, but I would also say so do graves and cemeteries. And some of my earliest cases were people with backlogs of cremains who were like, I didn't know this person, but like, you can't just throw it away. What do you do?
With the cremains?
Yeah. And so, yeah, that would be like sorting out where can we dispose of these that's respectful, that's still, meaningful, but isn't a huge cost.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. All right, what's next in our big cycle here?
Let's see. We've done, what are we on? Well, sea burial is an option. It was previously only available to Navy members, but there are facilities who have opened up kind of all along the coast who will allow you to be buried at sea if you'd like. It looks very much like a natural burial, so natural container. And then, you just kind of sink. There's certain areas dedicated to that, so it's not like a snorkeling surprise or anything. But they can be really, really nice. And if you're a water lover, I can absolutely see why you would want to be buried at sea. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly people's passion and calling, and they're part of the sea. And so that makes sense that you can return back that way. Yeah.
And I think we've kind of covered most of them at this point.
Yeah. All right. So what else is part of your job though? Where do you go from there?
Well, from there, once we've disposed of our body, we've had our funeral. And really, we have different kinds of funerals. We can talk about those too if you want to.
Yeah, let's do some of that.
Okay. So, of course, conventional funeral is with a funeral director, and they're going to handle most of what you need to do for you. I encourage everybody, if you are able to afford it, to hire a funeral director because it's much easier for them to file a death certificate. That's the main, you're going to need somebody to do that. But you can do it yourself if you want to. You just have to be kind of tenacious and know the government system. So we have our conventional funeral. From there, we have a home funeral, which is where a body is cared for at home. The body is cleansed and usually will go to a direct disposition. So your body is cleansed, cared for at home. There might be a viewing. And then from that point, you, for the most part, go straight to the crematorium. Or at least that's what most of my people do. They're really, really beautiful ceremonies. They're really personal ceremonies. My clients who have had long-term illnesses are choosing them increasingly more because it's nobody poking on you,
Right.
It's over. You're just going to rest at home. Everybody you need to say goodbye to is going to come say bye, and then we can move on. It's just a lot more gentle than what we see. Memorial is where we do the same kind of funeral service, but without the actual body there. I bump into a lot of people who feel like they're on this time schedule and that they have to hurry up. They have to get it done within the first 2 weeks. And When we're cremated, you don't have to do that. And you might choose another date that's significant. Maybe that person's birthday, maybe their favorite holiday, whatever. And like you said, have a big party, and it can be really, really, really fun. And a lot more meaningful for your guest. Another one that I'm really encouraging people to do is a living funeral, which is where you're going to say, I am dying. I am admitting that mortality, and I want you all to come say goodbye to me. When I say that, people are often instantly like, oh my God, that sounds so sad. And it is, but it gets better.
Somebody's got to talk first.
Right. And, you have that moment where there's sadness and we're, sharing those last hugs and doing those last goodbyes. And it is heavy and it is hard, but then it moves into something of a peace, Yeah. You did get that last hug. You did get to say goodbye. And that's a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah. It feels like nobody really wants to say the last goodbye because
it'll make it permanent.
Makes it permanent. But if you don't get that chance, then it's even more permanent, it feels like.
Right.
The home burials, the home funeral is pretty interesting. It feels like there ought to be more of those, but.
And it's something that I think when people imagine it, they're like, oh my God, how do you do all of that? But it's just there's a website called One Washcloth. And what it's about is you need one washcloth to cleanse the body, to make it appropriate for viewing. Anybody can do it. You just got to be a little bit brave about it.
Yeah. At our house, it'd be like, oh my God, now he's going to make me move the couch. I got to move this. Heck, I didn't vacuum under there. David, your socks.
I mean, just get the shop vac. They'll do anything.
Yeah, it'd be easier to just put me out in the driveway probably and people can honk as they go by.
Very COVID.
Honk once if you liked him. Honk twice if you want to flip him off as you drive past.
Whatever you need to do.
Yeah, whatever you need to do. We have posters a mile down the road. Yeah, just keep it moving.
Well, that's a reoccurring theme in funerals too. Keep it moving.
Yeah.
When they do the pass the mic around, we always call that open mic night. And you never know. Like either every single person there is going to tell a story, or everyone's just going to sit there and stare at the microphone. So it's always a risk when people want to do that.
What's your preference? Do you have a preference yet?
I think you can kind of tell who's an open mic person and who's not. Like, if you were a really loud, boisterous person, you probably have loud, boisterous people who have no problem picking up a microphone and talking about your most embarrassing moments. If you're more reserved, you're probably around a lot more reserved people, and maybe we don't do that part.
Yeah. But what's your preference for what you're in?
Oh.
Yeah. What are you thinking about doing? So
I'm going to be donated. One of my policies with all of this is I go first. So I did my advanced care directives first. I, practiced all my therapy things on myself. So it was always important for me to have that plan in place. I'm planning on donating my body to the University of Knoxville.
Yep.
The reason I've chose Knoxville is you decompose naturally outside, which was important to me. I'm going to have the ashes of my dogs in my hands. And, my bones will go and stay in their archive. And I hope I have the opportunity to have a living funeral. And from there, from my family.
I've always wanted to go study at the body farm.
They have 2 now.
Oh, they do?
Mm-hmm. They're expanding.
Yeah. From an investigator point of view, I've always found that just super fascinating and amazing that that's part of UT, right? Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm fascinated that they have created such a place, and it's so valuable to help whoever.
Right.
The data is super valuable coming out of that to understand how it works and how bodies work and the earth works and forces work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's one of our closest here in Lexington, but University of Kentucky is no longer accepting bodies, so you can't choose them. You can't choose U of L. But they are very picky about your body. They only have limited space, so you have to be kind of a petite, healthy person. But then there are other companies who, they'll come get you. They're going to come pick you up. They're going to do unlimited crazy things with your body. But if you're okay with that, go for it,
So, what do you mean? But let's go back to U of L. So,
okay.
Small, petite, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're storing a body in order to teach with it or to do whatever they're going to do.
They'll be doing med student dissection. And something I like to note here, those bodies don't get used once. Your body is used over a course of time. So they really get a lot of use out of those bodies.
I would imagine the supply is somewhat, I don't want to say limited, but I guess the supply is a little bit limited. So they're not just going to roll out a whole body, I would imagine.
Right. And, it can be different things. So, you might be the model who's going to show the veins and venules, and they're going to put certain dyes and things through your body so that can be seen when they're, there's all different variations of it.
Not to mention the different med school specialties, et cetera.
Right. Well, the first time they do surgeries, a lot of the time it's on a corpse. It's not
That's right.
a fresh person. Hold on. We've got a student.
He's waking up. Yeah, we got a student, not him.
Do you mind a student surgeon?
Oh, shoot. I had a question, but we moved from U of L to
general companies.
The private companies. So there's a market for these private companies to come pick up bodies.
Big time.
So they're just always communicating with the hospitals, I suppose, or how does that work?
You do fill out a form. So if I were dying and I knew I wanted to donate my body, I would fill out my release to that person or entity. And then most of the time, the thing that determines if you're able to be donated there is space. So if they have the space and the staff to do it, you can be donated, but they might not. So you need to have a second form in mind. Those larger companies, they're going to come get you. There's not a space limitation. Even during COVID, there was one that was still early COVID. They would still take bodies because they just do whatever with them, They test safety equipment. They practice surgeries, all sorts of different stuff.
So I'm immediately thinking of crash test dummies, but
yeah, they do that.
Yeah,
but with a actual body,
human body. Yeah,
but you're contributing to science, and like you said, I don't really care what happens to my body. So
well, but there's a lot of value.
If you like that last hurrah, go for it.
There's a lot to be considered for that, right? I mean, what's my body look like in a heavy collision? You got to know what that looks like.
And different kinds of bodies, so you need a selection.
Yeah. I've never heard of those companies either. That's fascinating to me that somebody's got a business model out there somewhere to say, we're going to go grab these dead people. And
it's usually little to no cost, which for some people that can be really, really important. So it's an important thing to know about. The kind of boundary for a lot of people is you don't always get your loved one back. So you might not be able to get their cremains. Some people that's a problem. Some people it's not. But that's sort of the thing.
Yeah. How interesting is that? Pretty neat. All right. Where else we need to go here?
Let's see. We've done home funerals. We've done conventional. We've done living. I think we've done all of our funerals. So I've kind of gone with the family from planning all the way through death. At that point, it's up to the family how much we interact. Some families, I'm part of their family now. We eat together. We keep in touch. We become friends. Some families I never hear from again because I represent the death of their loved one, and I totally get it. But that's the part that the families get to drive. I do a 3-month check-in, a 6-month check-in, and a 1-year check-in, and then you'll never hear from me again if you don't want to.
Why do you do that? Why is that important?
The check-ins?
Yeah.
I think just a lot of the time after a person dies, we say, you go to therapy. And that's it. That's all we do for you. You go to therapy and then you're going to be fine. And you have to have a certain personality for therapy to be successful. You have to be willing to talk about yourself. You have to be willing to talk about those type of things. And people aren't always willing to do it and aren't always in the headspace to do it, especially when we're mixing in grief. So I just did a 3-month check-in, and the things I said were this is the hardest part for a lot of people because life starts to become normal at this point. This is your new normal. This is you living in the absence of your person. And no one had talked to them like that. And, just knowing that was normal and feeling the way he felt in that moment was normal was helpful for him. So yeah, I just kind of try and check in, make sure everybody has what they need. There's not anything overly concerning going on. Not everybody has somebody checking on them. A lot of people have too many people checking on them. So, right. And that's another thing. There are people who be like, this is so annoying. I know, but they love you. So I'm sorry so many people love you. You're going to be fine. But not everybody has that type of community or structure. Right. And a lot of times, some of my clients, they've just outlived everybody. So there isn't anybody anymore. So, I can kind of fill in those spaces a little bit.
So on your checkups, you're really just following up with the family to make sure they're in a proper place with it. Right.
And there's not anything obvious we can do to make things easier.
Yeah. Do they receive those calls well? I mean, I know you kind of talked on it that some do, some don't, but.
Yeah. I mean, the calls for sure. I think people appreciate it. And, I just really appreciate having a person check in on them that maybe isn't, obligated to do it in some kind of way.
Yeah, that's right.
I also feel like some of my clients feel they can be more honest with me than they would be with other people. So they might not say, I'm really struggling with depression right now, but they might say that to me because I'm their death doula and I can, deal with it and it's not going to be a big deal. We're going to talk about how we're going to work on that and what we can do to make you more comfortable.
Yeah, I would think that people would open up to you. On the surface, I would think, I don't know if I'd want that call or not. But when you think about this holistic approach that you're taking to the death process and you're helping people plan for it, I mean, you really are the confidant of this whole process. And the process doesn't stop just because the body died.
Right.
You're only halfway through the process really at that point. And
there are people who, they outsource that. They might have a great therapist that they love and they feel comfortable talking to them. They might not. And, that's my job is to kind of fill in those spaces.
Now, are you some type of, are you some type of coach or are you?
No, I'm not a counselor, but if you want to talk to me about sad things, you can.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Well, that's right. I mean, you don't have to be
And I'm not going to act. I'm not going to, unless there's a life or death thing going on. Like, you can say what you need to say to me, and we're going to talk through it and process it. And
yeah, I think a lot of people need that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
and I think people worry about consequences sometimes for saying those things. Like, oh, you're going to say you're so depressed and you're going to have to go take medicine, and it's going to, like, it's going to just snowball into all this stuff when they really just need to have a conversation.
Yeah. That has to be rewarding. So as I'm trying to picture your processes and what that feels for you, and we talked a little bit about it, a little while ago, how do you deal with it? Then this makes a little bit better sense because you're able to kind of put some closure to, and help that family put some closure to this difficulty that they experienced.
I'd like to think so. I like to at least think I'm a safe person, and people know, they can contact me and I'm going to help them or get them to somebody who can.
Yeah. And so I know you said you're kind of driven into this a little bit, but you really kind of stumbled into this world, or did you?
I mean, I looked at mortuary school when I was graduating high school. It was something that was just always kind of like, man, that's interesting. It was really the pandemic more than anything that kind of thrust me into it.
But you seem so, I'm not a big fan of the calling, right? Calling. I'm not a big fan of saying that. I don't know how I fit with callings and stuff, but of people that I've talked to that do their job, you kind of seem to fit there.
Yeah. I don't know that I ever felt called to do it as much as I felt like it was something I could do and maybe do it pretty well. Like it's a rewarding thing that I can do that maybe other people can't always do so much.
I don't know if I agree with that. Just listening to you. I mean, I do, of course, but there's something deeper there to you that's allowing you to do this. I mean, I think, and I know you just 2 hours. I've only known you for a little bit, but I think there's a lot of things that you could do well, and you did do them well, but you have just kind of found yourself in this spot, and this spot seems to be a pretty good place for you. Yeah,
absolutely. And what I really love about death work is the changes we need to make, the things that can make things better. They're not monetary.
Right.
They're all very obtainable. They're all accessible. It's just about having the bravery to have these conversations. That's it.
Yeah, but you packaged it very well, right? You're able to come in as this.
I like to think it's not the heaviest conversation you've ever had, even though we're talking about death and dying. It's a great unifier. It's something that is going to affect all of us. It's going to hit us all equally. And, I think those things should be celebrated.
Yeah, they should be celebrated. All right, then let's get to, have we completed the process here?
Yes.
So let's get then to maybe a couple stories if you have any to share. Let's start. I think you always go bad first and finish on the high stuff. So,
oh gosh.
Yeah. Is there a story you can share that would be like your worst death doula experience?
Okay. So yeah, I'm just going to tell this story. It's horrible.
That's the moneymaker for the show.
Okay, I gotcha. So I'm advisor to Wendy Knoll Memorial Sanctuary, which is one of the first natural cemeteries in Kentucky. It's outside of Lawrenceburg. It's run in conjunction with the Unitarian Church here in Lexington. Great group of folks. They were introduced to me with very limited cemetery process knowledge. So one of the first things we did was kind of, just talk about how all this stuff works. And then we decided to dig a trial grave, which was important to me because, again, it's, me in a group of men who are like, digging a hole, no big deal. And I'm like, ooh, you just don't even know.
Yeah.
So we dug the grave. It went like, it was July. It was very hot. It was miserable. We got it done. We were able to do a trial burial where one of the board members actually acted as the body, and they got to practice lowering, all that stuff. Well, then they got a call that one of the members of the parish was going to pass away, and they wanted to use that grave. So all of a sudden it went from being like, oh, we're just out here digging a hole, playing around. Oh, we're burying a body. So, the grave was already dug. It had been an open hole, so we had to shop back the water out, get it all prepared. Everything's going great. At that point, the Courier Journal was following me to do a newspaper article, which should come out in the next few weeks. But yeah, I have a photographer and a very cute little journalist following me around, and it's a big opportunity for small business Lauren. Everything's going great. They've decorated the grave. It's really beautiful. It's a nice day. It's kind of overcast, so, we're not just sweating through everything. And I see the body pulling in, and I get this big flash of light, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to get a migraine. So right as the body's pulling in, I'm standing behind a tree, just absolutely puking my guts out.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm having a complete panic attack because these people are really, they're depending on me to kind of be the strong leader. So I'm like, oh, gotta get myself together and go lead this burial.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
So I'm over there just ooh. But we get it done. It's fine. I go back into a barn that's on the property, and one of the other volunteers is sponging me down. It's okay. The photographer from the Courier Journal comes, and she's like, oh, we need to take your portrait for the article. And I look down, and I have puke all down my shirt. And I'm like, okay. So I don't know if they'll print it, but if in the article there's a photo of me holding the left side of my body, it's because it's covered in vomit. And I left some fun details out of that. So early on in my burial career, I had an experience with a wicker casket. I'm not saying this is what happens with all wicker caskets, but this particular wicker casket was containing a very small person, and the handles had started to come off. Terrifying when you're moving a body.
Right.
It's scary. So this family had chosen a shroud. They decided to go back on that, and that they were going to use a wicker casket. Well, this was a big body. This was a 300-pound body. Oh, wow. And I was just like, no. No. So yeah, I was already super worried about that. And then the migraine and the vomiting and the pictures. So yeah, that was sort of a disaster, but we pulled through it. That was one of my personal worst days.
Who builds wicker baskets?
Oh, there are a ton of people. It's kind of like an up and coming agroforestry thing. A lot of people grow willow specifically to do it. But yeah, it's another. You can find all sorts of people.
And so that article's coming out here in a couple of weeks still?
I don't know exactly when, but here in a couple of weeks, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So we'll, because our show will come out.
Might line up a little bit. So
right, that's going to hit really good for you. I hope so anyway. Yeah. Okay. So that's
it's more greatest hits.
Yeah. Let's give a greatest hits. On the good side, what's been your best experience?
The best funeral I ever went to, it was a natural burial. It was an older woman who had cancer for a long time. And she had this great group of girlfriends. And before they buried her, they went to her home and they wore all of her fanciest clothes. So they show up to the graveyard and they're in sequins and big hats and feathers. They looked great. And they came, they asked us to leave because they smoked a joint with her because that, it's her thing. But, what I don't see, whatever. Right. And then when they were ready, they called us back over. They had a huge bottle of champagne and they sprayed her kind of like a race car almost, which I loved. There's this big smell, it was really ceremonial and cool. And then they lowered her in and they had all written letters. And so they put the letters in at the very end, and that was the end of her burial. But it was just really cool. And it was one of those, I knew exactly who that woman was.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about that. The letters, that's part of, that's another part of you that you do to help us on this side of life to prepare for, right? Let's talk about that for a few minutes.
So we've had our first ghost post, and it was just kind of I wanted to do something during Day of the Dead that was an active grief component. I wanted you to participate in a grieving play, or I wanted people to be able to do that. And so I just kind of came up, initially I wanted to do what's called a win phone. And a win phone, it's a phone to nowhere. You dial your loved one's name in, and then you have a conversation with them. That's the idea. But the Day of the Dead is a festival, and there are a ton of people around. And I was worried that people wouldn't feel comfortable having those type of conversations with so many people around. So I decided to make this goofy little cardboard ghost post box. It looked like a real mailbox. It had writing materials tucked in the side, so you could write a letter to whoever you lost, whatever loss means to you. They don't have to be dead. It might just be a person who's no longer part of your life.
Sure.
But I moved that around town a few different places. And after Day of the Dead, which, that's when the veil is thin, all of our spirits are supposed to be here. I removed all those letters. I didn't read them or anything. They were removed. They were put in a little cremation container, which we addressed as a ghost post, and then burned them that night. So they were delivered by airmail. But there's already a big call to do that again. So I think that might be an annual thing that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. So we saw that when we come to see your presentation. You had the post office box.
Yeah.
Right. So you had a good response to that?
We had 55 letters, which honestly, I thought I might go pick it up and it would be empty. So
right.
I was really excited to see that so many people had resonated, with them. And even at the Day of the Dead Festival, there were just so many families who sat down to do that together. And that was just really special for me. And children were really engaged with that idea.
Yeah. I mean, how cool is that it's almost a culture shift. I mean, you're almost kind of leading a little bit of a culture shift around here, I would think.
Yeah, I'd say all of our new death industry folks were kind of on the crest of a wave that has yet to crash in. So we'll see where we're going.
And I'll make this comment too. You had quite the following when we saw you at the brewery. I mean, Amanda and I made jokes. I played in bands that didn't have half that many people show up before and thought it was a great night.
Yeah, you never really know. People are into it during Halloween. I've never had a complete fail event, but I've done everything from a room of 1,300 people to 2 people.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, as we're coming down to the last few things here, I think. So, we've had a good discussion, but for people that may be listening, and I would think some of this is going to be new to some people and some people be familiar with it. But as you're talking to the people that aren't ready to do the list of planning yet, but what things would you say people need to consider? Why do we need to consider this? What's
the most important thing? And if you ignore every other thing I say, you need to do an advanced care directive. It doesn't need to be 5 wishes. You can get online and Google advanced care directive. AARP has a great one that's free, but you need to do that. If you are 18 years old and healthy, you need to have an advanced care directive. What kills me is that's part of my talk. I always ask people who had one when they're 18. I've only had one person who actually had one. And it's just because not only when you turn 18 are you, this own entity where there are decisions that need to be made, but you're also making decisions for other people. And if you've never seen an advanced care directive and all of a sudden you need to make decisions about life support, that's a big jump. Just look at it on your own time. It's free. It's accessible. If you get stuck, you can call a death doula. There are options to make this easier, but it's absolutely worth your time to complete that document. Please, please, please do that document.
Yeah. Anybody and everybody should do that.
If you're 18, do it.
Yeah.
And we have documents for, children who are terminally ill too. So if there are options for that fit, there are options for people with dementia, those type of things. So there, we can find a way to get that in writing what that person wants.
If nothing else, you seem like a great consultant, right? Again, this is all, I keep saying it. It's all new to me, right? But in hearing you now twice talk about this, it's really making me think about, I probably need to consider what's important to me.
Yeah.
A lot of the things you've talked about, you're really getting to the core values of the client, what's important, because you can plan for death to mirror up to that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I find a lot of people are their most authentic selves when they're dying. That's when you don't care anymore. You are who you are. And giving yourself the space to really, really lean into that can be absolutely magical.
Now, is that consulting service something that you do? Is that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. You can call me and we'll figure out what you need. But we always start at advanced care directive. That's always where it starts. You're not getting past me without one.
What else do we need to talk about this for tonight?
Oh, gosh. We've gone through a lot.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah. It's about authentically being you. That's what this is about. This is about you looking like yourself, not just to you, but to your family when you leave, and them having an appropriate celebration that really helps them grieve. And I know we keep saying funerals are for the living, and they are, but leaving directives, leaving ideas, that gives your family a way to honor you. And that can be really, really, really important.
I would think that's beyond powerful.
For sure.
Yeah.
And again, it's not about spending money or any of those things. It's just about having the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Amanda, anything else that? All right. So that gives us to the easy questions, right? How do we find you?
So my website is Getting a Makeover, but it's still there. And it's bgdeathdoula.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, we always start with a consultation. So you just give me a call. We talk for about 15 minutes, figure out where you're at, and we go from there.
And we'll have all those links in our show notes, and we'll get all those put there where people can see them and click on them and learn more about it. What other events do you have coming up here soon?
So it's not set in stone just yet, but we're going to be doing a pet grief Christmas tree. Pets are something that we don't do great with grief culturally anyway, but pets, we do a really abysmal job. And I think if you've lost a pet and gone to work that day or the next day, you just know how awful that feels. Yeah. But I really wanted to give people an opportunity to honor those pets with other people who are having that same experience and just kind of give them something to do for the holiday when your buddy's not there. And, yeah.
So where and when is that?
We're looking at Masterson Station Park, and it'll probably be for the duration of December.
Oh, wow. So it's a long-term event kind of.
Right. So the idea is it will be a tree that you can bring an ornament that represents your pet to and hang. And then at the end, I'll come collect them all.
What will you do then?
I don't know. Burn them. That seems you can come get it. I don't know. We'll think of something.
Yeah, you think of something. Those are the details to be worked out, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So we'll get all the links. We'll put that down there. I guess that's it. Anything else that you want to put on here?
I don't think so. I think we're good. I think we've done a pretty good swatch.
We've done a pretty good job of it.
Yeah.
I think this is fascinating. I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us. I mean,
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
It's just a neat thing, a neat service, and a neat, cool idea that people need to spend some time thinking about. And
it doesn't have to be hard or heavy. It can be kind of goofy and silly and weird and, cultural and all sorts of things.
Yeah. All those things, whatever is authentic to
whatever your adventure is.
Call the Death Doula. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next time.